Imagine a manga where all of the children die. I'm not talking about Serial Experiments Lane, I'm not talking about Bokurano, I'm not even talking about Promised Neverland. I'm talking about something much more grisly. Children, created by Miu Miura, I probably pronounced that wrong, is a really interesting manga. It's a short read, only 2 volumes, I think 13 chapters, but I remember reading it and thinking, this could have some real potential. And then I remember finishing it and thinking, this was pretty fucking bad. But there was something unique about it, and that drew me to talk about it. The story starts off with a teenage boy arriving at a rural Japanese village. He's here thinking that there's a lucrative summer job for me. I'm gonna make huge bank, and I can totally do this. Not too long after arriving, he meets the head teacher, another young person there who is the typical cute girl that has something weird going on, but you're just really enthralled with her beauty. And the kid's vibing. He thinks this is going to be a great summer job. Reminds me of all of those teenage slasher fics from back in the day. On the very first night of this guy being here, he discovers that these kids are all like mass murderers that kill adults with these grisly weapons. And it's so weird because it's like, I understand a shorter manga having to get through things very quickly, but we get to the killing right away. There is no tone setting, there is no establishment of who these characters are or even where they are or the time and place and the setting. We just get to a lot of murder within like the first 30 pages or so. These kids proclaim to be killing these evil adults and that they deserve their really disturbing deaths. Now, I really like this manga in the beginning because I could tell it was trying to do something really unique. And even the art style, while not the best, it really does illustrate the difference between these young kids, some of them as young as 4 years old, up to these teenagers. And then you see some of the adults and you're wondering what's going on here. There's a mystery element and there's also a really strong horror and gore element in this manga. So I was kind of vibing with it at first. Not too long after we get this Hell on Earth reveal, the main character finds himself trapped. He has to participate in these maimings and murders of all of these adults. The kids themselves, while active in these murders, are also pushed to do them by the head teacher. So now you're left wondering, how come you have like a dozen kids that are killing adults? Who's bringing these adults here? Why was the main character tipped off from his parents to come to this place? And the mystery grows along with the gore, and you're turning and turning the pages wondering what the hell is going to happen next. But then something in the back of my mind kind of just made me think that this manga is probably going to devolve into the main character just wanting to fuck the yandere and eventually killing off a whole bunch of adults. Which, spoiler alert, yeah, it kind of goes in that direction. Now, as I should double down on, this is a very gory manga. If you're not into seeing blood splatter more so than in Bleach, children getting hurt and maimed, if you're not into seeing Saw-like tactics being used on human beings, this definitely isn't the manga for you. I've never been a torture porn guy myself, but there's definitely less torture here and more senseless murder. So it's kind of hard to read sometimes, even for a grizzled old loser like me. But that being said, I think there is some charm in this manga. There's a lot of negative space being used, so when a death happens, it really does hit you hard. And you can imagine the environment, which is an abandoned building that has been converted to a childcare center, being a real place that you might stumble upon in an abandoned village. So it does add a sense of realism to this story, and it makes everything a lot more cathartic when you see it happening on the pages. Also, it's worth noting that the children are drawn really cute. They look like children of their age. So the juxtaposition between these kids going full-on murder mode to running around, playing with each other, asking the main character for a piggyback ride or to have a foot race. It's all very cute, and it's all very characteristic of what young children would ask the older head when they're at daycare. So I think that works very well, and even the main character he tends to lose his sense of understanding in the environment that he's in. He wants to save these kids, but these kids are open to and enthralled by murder. So for him, he's kind of confused. Are these kids all right? Can they even be saved? And the main character loves children. He wants to be a teacher. So he has this sense of protectiveness over these murderers that he just met, but these murderers are kids. But at the end of the day, these super kawaii kids do plan on killing every adult they see. They do not trust these adults, and they are willing and open to killing not only their friends, the other kids, but the main character as well. And the yandere bitch, oh my god. Don't even get me started with her. She's like a linchpin in this entire thing, a puppet master, if you will. And she doesn't have much of a personality aside from the typical tropes. You kind of are interested in what her motives are and why she's pushing the main character to participate. And yeah, I don't know. It really does create an interesting read when you're about halfway through, maybe 2/3 of the way through the first volume. As the story progresses and more details are revealed about the plot, we also get more background information on these characters. A lot of these children come from very troubled homes. Some of them have been abused, mentally, emotionally, physically, sexually, and you can tell that the author is making a very strong and interesting commentary on children who have to deal with these harsh backgrounds and how it can have an effect on their psyche even from such a young age. We have kids who have been physically abused and have scars. Kids who identify with a different gender but their parents don't agree. Siblings who have to essentially battle against one another because the parents are pitting their kids against one another. And I know some people may relate to these stories, or maybe they have secondhand relation to these stories, but aside from what these kids are going through, it's easy for the reader to kind of sympathize for them a little bit and justify why they're so into killing adults and they don't trust adults. It's not just a rule that has been told to them by the head teacher. It's something that in their life before they came to this child care center, they couldn't trust the adults in their life that were there and they were supposed to protect them, but instead these adults were hurting them. So I will say also that I do get a little bit of a Promised Neverland vibe here. Some of these kids have been in this childcare center for years, a couple months, 10 years even. It seems that if you don't go along with the murder and the mayhem, you yourself get killed and you become a star, as the head teacher puts it. And for a lot of these kids, they have to get used to seeing their peers die, and sometimes they themselves have to murder these kids and then chop them up and discard of the corpses in the local river. It's very dark. It's a little cringy at times, not gonna lie, but it's a story that, even though it is unbelievable, it's intriguing in some ways. As we hit the second volume, the storytelling of the manga, it hits breakneck speeds, and the entire vibe of the manga and the story itself changes. All of the sudden, we go from a slasher mystery flick to a straight up farce of horror. I wasn't even scared. I found myself turning the pages of this manga to not see what happens next like I did in the first volume, but to just kind of get it over with and see where this was going. But I could tell the author, either he planned to have this go on longer than it actually ended up being, or maybe he lost interest. I'm not sure. I didn't do that much research. I didn't really want to, but yeah, it just was such a weird shift in tone and direction when we hit the second volume. By the ending of the manga, it's not very strong, and I am probably going to forget the fact that I read this manga 3 days from now. Unfortunately, I don't remember anybody's name. I don't really care about any of the characters. The plot twists within the last few chapters is really strange because this is a 13 chapter manga. I feel that if it had 26 to 40 chapters even, So 4 to 6 volumes, it would have been a lot better. It would have been something that would have been more interesting of a read. It would have been a manga that could have fleshed out the characters and the mystery more. But they introduced the big bad in such a stupid way. It's really stupid. It feels like I'm watching one of those Y2K slasher flicks, except like more dumb, if you can believe that. I hope this manga never gets a sequel. It was pretty bad. However, I think it would make a really good anime adaptation. I do believe that if it got like a 13 episode season, you can talk about all of the taboo topics of child abuse, child murder, what happens when children turn around and they become murderous themselves, adults that deserve what they are getting, adults that don't deserve the abuse that they get. There are a lot of stories that if this manga had the time to tell it, could have fleshed it out a lot better. At the end of the day, if you're looking for something that has short amount of chapters, something that you want to read on the train ride to work or before you go to bed, I'd recommend Children if you have no problem with seeing grisly deaths and a lot of negative space art, which kind of feels like of its time, early 2010s manga. It's not bad. I think the cover colors were really interesting, and I think some of the character designs were kind of unique. I would like to see what the mangaka could do with a more mainstream work. He hasn't done much aside from Children. I think a one-shot. Maybe I'll look into that. But I'm giving Children a solid 3 out of 10.